Welcome back, y'all, to the podcast Under Your Bed. We got your hostess, Taylor.
Hey.
And I am your host, CJ. We are coming at you OG today. Some Romero in the house with Night of the Living Dead, 1968.
Big heart around that. Big heart around that one.
We're excited. I think we're going to have lots to talk about. Sorry for a long one again, probably. If you don't know, this is zombie invasion breaks out in rural Pennsylvania and chaos ensues. This is basically credited as like the OG zombie film, at least in the sense of like how modern audiences think of zombies today.
They set the rules. Like, obviously the term zombie was around way prior to this, but that was obviously, it was all not the best racially appropriate explanation of like Haitian voodoo and stuff, but that's really what like the term zombie was equated with. And this was like really the game changer, that all the rules we know and love today, that they're cannibalistic, you gotta shoot them in the head, all that good stuff comes from this fucking movie.
Kind of slow hordes of zombies coming in.
I love a slow zombie.
Trying to eat you alive. So Taylor, walk us through some of this cast. I mean, it's from 1968, so not super familiar, but if you know the movie, you know the cast.
And this is like just the epitome of working on a low budget, because literally almost every cast member has some like production side of things, which is really interesting. Yes. But I think like the two main people that like were primarily like stage actors as well, not so much known for like feature film work even after this, but we have Ben, we all love Ben, played by Dwayne Jones, again, huge theater actor. Then Barbra is played by Judith O'Dea, and like I said, everybody else kind of, except I think maybe Tom and Judy were more actors, but everyone else in this film is like a producer or did the makeup effects. And then even Helen like doubles up as a zombie and playing Helen and does the makeup and had a production team with her husband. It's just like, it's so wild to me. So even though the names are not so familiar, their faces definitely are if you've seen these films. And just to know that they did all this background stuff is just so fucking cool, to be honest.
I just want to shout out maybe one of my favorite characters in the movie.
Do it.
George Costanza as Sheriff McClellan. I just love him every time I watch this flick. I don't think the guy's ever acted. I think they just stuck a camera on a real sheriff and he's just like, well, this is how it fucking is. Zombies are eating people.
He has some of the best, like, I think some of the best acting comes from clearly, like, again, the production team members that were involved in this. And I swear, was he saying something like, oh yeah, they're all messed up. Like that's just, it's so good.
It's not good. So obviously directed by George Romero. He's just gone on for a slew of zombie films: Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, Survival of the Dead.
All the deads.
Dead in the title. He probably made it. So obviously a legend. He also was largely responsible for the editing and music selection. Written with help from John Russo, and cinematography again, Romero. I mean, this is as low budget as you get, one-man band style.
100.
And of course, this flick is also pretty intense with the gore for the time. Was kind of new. So coming in with some Tony Pantanella and Regis Servinsky, I believe I'm saying that, Servinsky.
Many real chicken. Well, I assume chicken. I guess I don't know what animal it was, but lots of real animal bits. Which
I definitely
is like,
saw like a real like lizard or liver. I mean, like a.
Covered in Hershey syrup.
Really, I love it. I mean, the effects were just lots of fun. And of course, being shot in black and white, they could get away with a lot.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So, really, this was kind of revolutionary for the genre of horror. Established, the tropes of zombie films, and also really gave audiences something new from the universal horror flicks of the day. So I would love to hear some of your favorite things going on in this film, and is there anything that you didn't like before we get into the spoiler section?
Oh boy. It's cool because I think Romero kind of phrased it as like he thought he was creating this new monster, and like in a sort of way he did, for sure, because again, it is very different than what the term zombie was equated with prior to this, but it's almost like an evolution on the Universal movie monsters. Is taking that concept and running with it and adding social commentary. And in this one, slightly unintentionally adding social commentary, but then obviously for each subsequent film, that's like the highlight. That's what we look for. What is the tie with the zombies and what's going on at that time that we're getting this kind of narrative. So it's just amazing that you could like kind of unintentionally fall into these like really big themes that end up emerging and then running with it later. And I'm a huge Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead fan. So I love the OG trilogy. I'm all about it. And just seeing how that, again, it's that in itself is an evolution, which is really cool. This is a hard one to like nitpick with because it is so low budget that I feel like the things you could like nitpick on are really associated with that factor. And it's just so fucking iconic that it's really hard for me to like find the negatives in it or be really hypercritical of it. Though I know it's not a perfect film. It's just so influential that it's really hard for me to like break it up. I mean, did you have any areas where you're like, oh man, this is not working for me today, or as a modern audience member?
No, I really don't. And to that point, to me, it's a film that really stood the test of time, probably for like 40, 50 years, right? Obviously now it's very dated, but I think for a very long time it held its power. And I think that's largely due to a very good eye for camera, a very kinetic camera, as well as very kinetic and energetic editing. This movie really moved. Especially for a movie from 68. So for those reasons, and then also just how much it disrupted the genre, I think it's just scores really high in kind of like my ranking for an OG film. And yeah, obviously it's an indie film. At the end of the day, there's subpar acting at times. Some of the dialogue is questionable, and there's technical errors with camera and lighting, but the story is great and interesting. And even if you told the same story today, audiences would be engaged and interested, if it had like that little bit of a facelift with technical aspects of the film.
Well, that's it. That's like Walking Dead owes everything tonight. Living Dead. Like it is interesting too to think like now we just kind of associate like, yes, there's going to be a band of survivors and they're going to have interpersonal conflicts and they're going to have to figure out how to work with that. And also with this outside, there's an internal and external threat. Like that's just so par for the course. But especially when I think back to like movies like White Zombie, I'm like, that's not the formula attached. Like this truly was the establishment of that formula and of that idea, and that like you do need other people to survive. You can't like go through this alone. And obviously thematically it's gotten a lot more complex than that, but it is just really cool to think this was the start. This was it.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I want to hear some ratings, Taylor.
Oh man, okay.
In terms of, let's start with the easy one perhaps. I don't know. In terms of like overall rating, I think is actually
that is easier.
Yeah. So overall rating of the film out of 4 stars, where does it land for you?
I mean, like, look, I'll be honest. I'm going to be biased talking about this film. It's a movie I watch every single year around Halloween, if not other times of the year, just because I feel like it. Because it's like a comfort movie almost. It's just I've seen it so many times. So I think we've talked about like, okay, we can nitpick the hell out of any movie, and especially something like this. Like you said, there's a lot of technical errors. The acting is not great at times. Barbra, as like, you know, what we think of final girls, she sucks as a final girl. But obviously that trope wasn't there yet, so we'll give it a pass. But just say like there's a lot to pull apart and say like, I don't like this, I don't like that, that doesn't work for me, whatever. But just as a personal thing and something I love so much, there's no way I could give it any less than 3 stars. And I even feel like I'm going to bump it to like a 3.5 just because of my personal,
what do we say about halvesies, Taylor?
I fucking know. I know, but it's so hard for me. Like, I just want to save the 4s for this, like, you know, actually, this is the upper echelon for me. This is the upper echelon for me. I shouldn't have even said that. You know, controversial. If you want to pull it apart for technicalities, I completely understand. But if I'm going on my personal love of this film and what it did for the genre and how fucking dope it is, it's getting a 4 from me. I know that's really high for me, but how about for you?
All right, I'm gonna actually give it 2 ratings. Here's my cop out. So,
the halfies don't count, but you're giving it a 2 rating.
They're neither of them are halvesy, so I see. But as a filmmaker, give this movie a 4. That's because of its ingenuity, its audaciousness, and doing something new, doing something with limits, and creating something masterful that's withstood the test of time. And then, you know, from a modern audience perspective to somebody that hasn't seen this movie, I'm just going to say we'll call it a 3 because you, as a modern audience, are not going to necessarily love this if you don't like classic movies. You know, like I think that's
for sure.
If you don't like classic horror flicks, you're just not going to buy in. If you're looking for, you know, those modern day like over the top gore and very fast moving sequences, this isn't going to be it. But at the time, I would say this was that.
100%, yes.
So come along for the ride, check it out. All right, Taylor, scariness. Out of 4 monsters under your bed, how many monsters does it get?
You know, I've said this. It's so hard for me when it's something that I've seen so many times to even like fairly rate something like this. Like I even said this with Scream. I've seen Scream. Again, it's a yearly watch for me. So the scare factor, obviously, the more you watch something, it's just going to go down and down and down and down. And like, if we're being honest, it didn't quite flesh out like some of the more complex things that we might like think are scary by today's standards. So it sounds like a harsh thing to say, but again, this is a very like Scream-esque answer for myself, but it's not a reflection on the film or how much I love it. It's just, if you're asking me like, am I scared of it? No, I'll give it a 1 because in honesty, some of that gore is like actual animal parts. And when I think about it covered in Hershey's, I do want to puke a little bit. So I'm going to give it the 1 because they did do a good job with the gore. But obviously, it's just not there for me in terms of scares, though. Spoiler, not spoiler, I guess the ending is probably the most horrifying part, and that would probably bump it up for me. But if we're just talking in terms of the film, I'm going to give it like a 1, to be honest. How about for you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm struggling to get it to a 2. I'm landing at a 1 monster under your bed. And I remember the first time watching this, I might have been 8 years old, watching with my brother alone in the house at night. Like rented the VHS tape, you know, from the local rental store. Classic. And I don't remember it particularly haunting me the way like a movie like Jaws did. Like I remember that one just rocked me as a kid.
Well, then you were afraid of the water, I guess.
Maybe it's because there was like somewhere we're gonna get ready. But this movie just didn't haunt me in that way, and maybe part of it's because the slow moving zombie, you're kind of like, well, just fucking jog away from them, But
totally.
I get it's like the hordes. It's a scary concept being kind of trapped, and like you're saying, some of the scariest elements are actually like the people around you.
Yes.
How you survive in a group, and I think there's a lot of great critique there on society too. But that's besides the point.
I can't wait to get into that part. Yeah.
So 1 star for me. If you want to hear our critiques on those themes and others, I recommend you stick around for the spoiler section coming up right after this.
And the theme cocktail, guys. If you're piecing out before this, you're missing out on the drink.
Oh, gotta stay around for that.
Welcome to the podcast Under Your Bed. There'll be drinks, critique, and perhaps a few murders. You're all invited, but once the podcast has begun, there's no way out. The ghosts are waiting, so won't you join me for the podcast Under Your Bed?
They're coming to get you, Barbra.
I will never get tired of doing this. This is my favorite part. This is why I record these episodes.
I like the mix up, bring in a little flavor, bring in a quote here and there. I like it.
Keep it coming. Taylor, I'm on drink duty today.
You are.
Tell me what I'm talking about, though.
We are covering, this is a pretty well-known cocktail, and at least in terms of its name, but it's the Corpse Reviver number 2. This drink was important. Like technically, this drink was technically made as like a hangover cure, which I love because it's like literally so much alcohol.
You're enlightening. First of all, well known. I've never heard of this drink, the Corpse Reviver.
You never heard of a Corpse Reviver?
Maybe I'm just out of the loop. I'm sorry.
My goodness.
But that's great to know. I'm having one every morning now. This is wonderful. I mean, it is straight liquor. And I gotta tell y'all, if you haven't had it, it is delicious. It's
really good.
So it's basically a gin, Lille Blanc, orange liqueur, and lemon juice, and it's all equal parts. So you can't screw this up. You just equal parts. And then you throw some a little absinthe to just wet the glass.
A rinse, they called it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever done.
I've never.
Which is weird. I don't think I've ever done a rinse in a cocktail, and I guess there's like a couple different ways you could do it. You could like mist it. You can dump it in and pour it out. Like there's a couple different ways to do like the rinse, quote unquote.
I need an absinthe spray bottle. I think that's mandatory in my my bar cart now. That is too fancy for me. I'm telling you, the rinse just is the perfect amount of absinthe to add it that little extra flair.
As a non-absinthe fan, it's great because there's like a little tiny hint, but it doesn't have that like when we did the Death in the Afternoon, and that was like there was a giant part of absinthe in it, and I struggle bust to do that. But this is very drinkable, drinkable.
Completely agree. And it kind of reminds me of like a Prohibition era drink.
Totally,
it's very good. So everybody grab one. And while we're talking through this spoiler summary review for you, so if it's been a while since you've seen it, you know what's going on, or if you haven't seen it and want to be that asshole listening along, not having watched one of the phenomenal classics of all of cinematography history, then okay, go ahead and do it. But we're judging.
It'll never be as good coming from us, guys. We do it as a reminder for you, but again, it's never as good as the movie, especially you're always hearing one of us talk, so you know it's not as good. So go ahead and watch the movie
immediately. No,
if you haven't already.
All right, Taylor, send it for us.
All right, so we open on two siblings, Barbara and Johnny, visiting their late father's grave before being very rudely interrupted by what we will soon call a zombie.
Yes.
The recently undead man attacks Barbara, and while coming to her aid, Johnny is killed when I guess like he didn't hit his head, the zombie did it, but still, yeah, he hit his head on the tombstone. Barbara subsequently flees and manages to make it to a nearby, seemingly abandoned farmhouse. As night falls, Barbara discovers the corpse of the house owner, super fun, and sees several zombies making their way to the home. In an attempt to find gas, our ultimate protagonist, guys, the best ever, Ben arrives at the home and proves himself to be a total badass, taking out what they refer to as ghouls. As more arrive, though, he and Barbara decide to lock down the house. While fortifying the home, the radio reports about cannibalistic mass homicides occurring across several states, and they provide the very beneficial tip of stay at home.
Maybe don't go into the homicidal crowds of zombies.
Super helpful. While this occurs, two men emerge from the basement, and it turns out there's been a group of survivors there all along. This group includes a young couple, Tom and Judy, and a family consisting of Harry, Helen, and their injured daughter, Karen. And Harry and Helen, there's a dynamic there for sure.
Look, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Helen is a total badass also, by the way. Immediately, there is a debate, especially amongst Harry and Ben, about the best way to survive, with Harry saying that the group should stay in the cellar, and Ben and Tom calling it essentially a death trap with literally only one way out. Harry pouts when Tom and Judy elect to stay upstairs, and his plan further deteriorates when Helen also joins the upstairs crew. The survivors then hear another report officially confirming the mass murders, quote unquote, are actually the recently deceased, and then they can only be killed by severe damage to the brain, aka get those headshots in. Due to Karen's injuries, a plan is devised to seek medical attention and refuge by refueling Ben's car with a gas pump located outside the house. Ben, Judy, and Tom execute the plan, but things go sideways when the gas pump spills out and causes the truck to explode, killing both Tom and Judy. Ben runs... Oh, yeah. It was, literally, they were like spraying it everywhere. It was just kind of a shit show, but
Fun fact, my son just did this to me 2 days ago, the little bastard.
Are you serious?
I let him pump the gas, and he pulled it out while he was still holding it. I was like, no, put it back.
You're like, I've seen this movie. I've seen this movie.
Attacking, it's an honest mistake.
I think it was in this case too, to be fair, but it still was like, oh my God, come on, guys.
Yeah.
So Ben, our only survivor of this crew, runs back to the home, but is locked out by Harry because obviously Harry sucks.
Dick.
The worst. Ben eventually makes his way inside because of course he does, and subsequently kicks the crap out of Harry. The ghouls attack the home, and another fight between Harry and Ben erupts, causing Ben to shoot Harry. Harry then falls to the basement and succumbs to his injuries, and Karen, who has also succumbed to her wounds, begins eating her father when Helen makes it to the basement.
Nice.
Karen then attacks... Oh, this is such a great part. Karen then attacks Helen with a trowel and kills her. You gotta love, zombies utilizing tools. It's a vibe for sure. Meanwhile, Ben and Barbara fight to keep the barricade up, but Barbara is eventually pulled out of the home by a reanimated Johnny. As ghouls flood the home, Ben is forced into the basement, where he officially ends Harry, technically for the second time, and Helen just as she reanimates. The next morning, a group of mercenaries arrives and clears out the horde. I hate saying this. Okay, this is okay.
You can do it.
Painful for me.
I'm here for it.
I can do it. Ben makes his way to the window, but is shot by the group after being mistaken for a ghoul. His body is unceremoniously thrown into a makeshift funeral pile with the rest of the undead, including our very first zombie from the cemetery. And that is the most fucking bleak ending of a horror movie, in the entire history of horror movies. One of the worst. It's so depressing.
I love it. I love it.
Painful.
I love it.
Painful. It's so painful.
Yeah, I love to hate it. I hate to love it.
Yes.
I don't know. Okay. All right. I don't know where we want to start, but maybe we could talk a little bit about just the zombies. This is like established the what a zombie movie is, what we expect from zombie movies now. What do we expect about the zombies themselves? It's classic, right? They're slow, they are actually the undead, right? They have died. They're not disease ridden. They're not fast. They're dumb, but what's interesting is they use tools, like you mentioned, like they're smashing headlights with rocks, smashing windows with rocks.
Oh yeah.
There's kind of a lot of zombie movies today. You see like a really dumb zombie that can't do anything, and so that's kind of interesting. What do you like about these zombies?
Well, it is cool you touched on that because I think Romero's Land of the Dead is actually like kind of to me like an extension of these zombies because actually, you could say that. You could say about Day of the Dead too with Bub. But it's cool how Romero's zombies are, you're right, they appear very dumb, but then they also like are able to utilize tools, and especially like Day of the Dead, they're like trying to teach the zombie to be like a person and he's listening to music, and then you get Land of the Dead where they're actually like formulating like not quite strategic planning, but they're kind of this unified group that are able to use tools and stuff as well. So it is just cool how Romero like makes this concept and then is like, yeah, I can keep going with this. This small hinting that I sprinkled into Today the Living Dead, and I'm going to get them to be a fully unified group by the time I get to one of my last movies. That's pretty dope. But I mean, like you said it, this was the start, and we kind of touched on it in the beginning, but like the zombies eventually too become like a reflection of societal values. And I feel like the ending more hints on what was going on at the time, where like again the next films it's a lot more clearly stated. But I love a basic zombie because I said it in 28 Days Later, but there's no hope of survival with like a fast zombie horde or like that kind of scenario. Your only hope is that these things are too stupid and too slow, and that you're going to be able to like outrun him or outsmart him or whatever. So I love this kind of zombie. This is a zombie for me for sure. What's your take on this type of zombie?
Oh man, I'm torn. I love both. I think they both have a place, and I love modern zombie movies with fast zombies. 28 Days Later, that's one of my favorite movies, and I know it's not an undead, it's a diseased, but
yes, that's right.
I also love that sort of like slow, haunting quality of just relentless pursuit, and it reminds me of like the It Follows, right, where it's just they're always there, always waiting for you. So absolutely love that. I love kind of the shuffling of these zombies. And I don't think there's one thing I like about these zombies actually is that none of them are like overly over the top unique. Like they are all like just dead people that like, I don't know, you passed on the street, so it's not like they're these outlandish zombie characters where a lot of like modern movies are like creating these wildly unique characters out of the zombies, and I just don't think it's necessary. Like they're a little more faceless in this, just like the horde of people, like again maybe like that comment back to being society, like just this mob of like faceless beings, and I think there's some value to it, but there's maybe room for growth too, like just fun ways to experiment with it.
Yeah, and they certainly, like, even Romero does, which is like the cool part about that to me is that again, like he's made this trope without knowing at the time that it was going to be a trope, and then still found ways to be innovative within his own confines, which I think is like just incredible.
Right. So, one of the things like it establishes the genre, right, of zombies. Like a lot of things you see of, like maybe an early scene that kind of like you're going about like daily life activity, something's a little unusual, and then, oh my God, it's like revealed end of times. And it goes on to establish other things like, okay, find shelter, you're holed up in a house, and then you end up like partnering up with other people. Can you come to the same decision as the people you're with? Do you bug out or do you bug in?
Or learning the rules too, because there were not rules at this point.
That's true. So, and then also like somebody within the group becoming infected and having to make those decisions, and that causing a problem from within, and that infighting, and then of course how it all sort of like breaks down at the end, and it's kind of every man for himself. This movie like really established that. And one of the other things I love that you see all the time now is like some of the zombie characters coming back to like kill like the person they love, or the like OG zombies in the early scenes coming back like to keep trying to kill the one character. I think that's
that cemetery guy, he is relentless. He's like, I will be here till the end. And he's actually one of the last shots as well on the where Ben's being burned as well is that zombie. So it is a little iconic.
Yeah, it's true. So tell me a bit about the characters going on, because we have some great ones and then we have some maybe not so great ones.
Ooh, tough to pick there where to start. I think let's just pull apart, because we've just given a lot of praise. Let's go ahead and pull apart some of the not as great bits of it. So you get characters like Tom and Judy, who aren't like super consequential to the plot in the long run, but they like seem to make their mark well enough. And you're like, okay, like it's good. They provide like backup for Ben and stuff like that. Obviously the hardest one to reckon with as a modern day audience, and what we come to expect again with the final girl and the final girl tropes. Barbra is probably one of the hardest characters to get behind or understand. I mean, perhaps she's having probably the most like realistic response to what's going on, but like that's not what we want to see in our survivors. So is that fair? Is that not fair? Like, what's your take on having a catatonic lead female?
All right. The film is progressive in its like ideas on race, not so much sexism. Strong.
No, Helen is cool.
Helen's legit. She's dope, but a strong black male lead. However, really not any strong female characters. They make some choices that always end poorly, and throughout the film, like one of the best lines was like what are we supposed to do? We can't go anywhere. We have a sick kid and women. It was like that overt, just like, what? We can't move. We're incapable.
Well, Harry sucks, and he's super discounts Helen, because I do like Helen too. Like, because there was one part. I'm trying to remember what the context was, but
and sarcasm around.
She fucking throws it blatantly in his face she's like, "Oh yeah, it's super important that you're right. Like that's the number one thing we need to be worried about is stroking your ego." And I'm like, this girl gets it.
Yep.
But then she also meets a pretty honestly, she might have the best death, to be fair. But like, her end isn't great. Judy does some poor choices, even though you're like, oh, good for her. She's going out there, but then she ends up kind of screwing it up for everybody. So you're right. Like, it doesn't really work out super well for any female in the movie.
Yeah. But okay. So back to your point though. Yeah. Barbra shits the bed as like your final girl. And it's a bummer because like she was established as kind of this like great final girl. She makes a lot of smart decisions in the opening scene.
Yeah.
She fights off the zombie. She gets in the car, drives away. Yes, it crashes, but she she's able to escape that and find a house which she holds up in. And then once Ben shows up to the scene, oh no, there's a strong male lead, and then she's just this catatonic zombie herself. So it's a little unfortunate, but I don't know. We'll chalk it up to the times and move past it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I will give I do want to say I'll give Romero credit for him recognizing that was an error and that she became very damselly, and I give the remake a lot of credit in completely fucking changing the character of Barbra. She is a fucking badass in the 90s remake with Tony Todd. She crushes it. So they're definitely. And I don't know, is it fair that we're holding, as a horror community, we hold our final girls on a very high pedestal. So is it fair? Could a guy have that response? We wouldn't be as hypercritical, perhaps, but she just doesn't bring a lot to the plate being catatonic.
I mean, to me, it was, does it matter that she's a woman instead of a man? No, I think the character.
We love a final girl, though. We love a badass final girl.
Yeah, she made this half-ass attempt at joining the group in the end, and it just didn't work for me. So it would have been nice to to develop her. Integrate her more into the movie as
for sure, because actually the parts where this is where I feel it's such a miss to me, and not necessarily on an acting situation where it's a miss for me is when she's actively participating and actively helping Ben, especially at the end right before she gets killed.
Yeah.
I'm yes, I see some light there. I see some cool connection between these two characters, and I don't even mind that she initially has my brother's dead. I don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
But my issue is that she goes back and forth with it, and it makes it really hard to be a compelling character when it's I'm in it, I'm out. I'm in it, I'm out. That's where I feel it's definitely more of a writing issue and not so much the actress per se.
So you brought up the writing, and I think it's interesting that I loved the dialogue actually in most of the scenes.
One of my only criticisms about the writing is just about Barbra. Otherwise, I agree with you.
Yeah, because it's almost very mundane and it's not expositional and it's not forced. It's really just talking about what needs to be done or kind of falling back into their the moments of Ben sharing how he ended up at the house of just trying to process his trauma and process what's happening around him. I think are great moments in the dialogue, and even the opening stuff between Barbra and why am I forgetting the brother Johnny of just the back and forth of brother sister.
I loved it.
Each other, is great in the car, and I thought, at times it felt maybe a little cheesy, but it seemed like an intentional choice of kind of subverting the genre and expectations of, is this going to have this bad standard movie full of romance beelines and a hero that's going to save the damsel in distress, and then
much like the Universal movies,
exactly where Johnny gets offed in the first 5 minutes of the film, and all of a sudden you realize, wait, maybe I'm not in for the movie that I thought I was. Which I think.
Can you imagine being that audience? And by the way, I don't mean that to shit on Universal movie monsters.
No.
I'm obsessed with them. But I cannot imagine at that time going to the theater and you're these are two people. Clearly these are protagonists, this brother sister duo. Johnny's got a lot of personality. You see them as this is going to be a whole thing, and then he's off in the first 3 minutes, and then you're totally shifting gears out of the setting, out of the character expectations, and then you're moving into this group dynamic in suburbia, and it's so different. It must have been crazy to see at the time.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine. Back to the characters, I want your thoughts on Ben. I already know, he's loved. Everybody loves him. Why is he so loved? Why do you love him?
Oh, he's loved for, I think, like a multitude of reasons. I think one of the first selling points for me with Ben is actually like his gentleness. Like he comes in hot and like a total badass. And then, there's this scene where they're boarding stuff up and he's telling Barbara what to do. And she's just, again, pretty fucking useless. And he's like, look, God damn it. And then he's like, okay, wait, here's the thing. Like, brings it down and he's like, I'm scared. You're scared. We've got to like get through this together. And that's where I think like was right away where I was like, this guy, I love this guy and I don't want anything bad to happen. Was that part. But I also like that Ben is not without his flaws. I mean, essentially, he kind of murders Harry. Like, he does. Like, he shoots the guy. Like, that happened. And obviously, there's like some serious power struggles between the two. And I think, obviously, we know Romero, it wasn't like intentional to have this race element, but obviously, it definitely was there. And especially with that power dynamic as well, having this white dude who looks like he's relatively well off, really pissed off about the fact that Ben is clearly like the leader and embodies like what you'd want in a leader. And again, it's like that courage and that empathy and the planning. And like, Ben is just such a fucking solid character to me. I mean, sorry, I've like gone on a whole thing. What's your feeling about Ben?
Let's not forget, it was 1968. There's a lot of shit going on in America. And I think it's a bold choice, even if Romero isn't necessarily like casting with that context, right? And we both know that, Dwayne Jones had it clearly in his mind when he was smacking a white girl on screen and what kind of repercussions he might be facing. Like, he's got some self-preservation in mind, both on screen and off screen, in terms of
even just being the lead, like that's already, which is again, massively fucked up, obviously. But the fact that he just took this lead role and it's obviously just such a testament to him and like obviously how white people just ignore this stuff too. But like the fact that he was so cognizant, like this is a big fucking deal that I am this lead character and I'm the lead guy, and that nobody else around him was quite picking up on like how significant that was, especially at that time.
Yeah. And then he crushed the role. He crushed his acting was great. And you're right. Like, I think what brought it to life was actually that like gentle quality, that sort of subdued nature at times, where then it kind of felt more explosive and emotional when he did get frustrated and battling with Harry and the power dynamics but then you also got those moments where he is taking care of Barbara when she's kind of catatonic and passed out, and in
the monologue that you mentioned, that was like a powerhouse monologue that he delivered. I feel bad because Barbara like almost couldn't stand a chance in comparison to the two little monologues going on.
It's true. I at the time when I was rewatching, I was kind of like, oh, it almost speaks to like how an African American kind of has to like be better just to participate in the same leagues, right? Yep. And that really screamed out on camera. Now, I know Romero didn't claim that it was this like choice, that it was, Dwayne Jones was just the best man for the job. And what I came across that was interesting is this was an indie film, kind of a breakout film from Romero. And at the time he was doing a lot of commercial work. And when you look at the commercial work he's doing, he had a lot of black cast in the commercials. So it really was just kind of like who he is. He's not looking at the race aspect of it. Just hiring kind of who he thinks is the best for the role, which I think is awesome. And that commercial quality, though, I think really lent itself to fast-paced editing, is my assumption, because the first thing that jumped out to me was, one, camera has a lot of really nice classic work going on, but the pace of the editing really moved for 68.
I totally agree. It's like, obviously, we get a few maybe slightly repetitive moments, mostly because Barbara's so stagnant with
Well,
the two of
I
them,
was gonna
which
say
is
it felt
kind of
more
like a
like the story didn't keep up with the pace of the edit,
totally agree. And again, like, that's where it's a little frustrating, where if they had kept up with like Barbara being consistently engaged, or at least like being catatonic then engaged, it might have like fit together like slightly better. And again, that's like nitpicking quality and just what we expect with modern filmmaking. But I think you're right. Like, editing wise, the camera, and you're going to be able to touch on this like so much better than I can. But to me, when I was watching this specifically for this podcast episode and just not watching it for my personal enjoyment, I couldn't help but pick on like how much that camera moved. Like, it was crazy to me. Because in every shot, I also was just like, oh, love it. Like, because it just kept
Right.
moving. There's a lot of close-ups. There's a lot of like moving to the exterior. And again, I just feel like this is something you're going to have a much more better commentary on, other than it was fucking awesome. But it really was awesome to see, especially like you said, a film from the late 60s moving so quickly.
Right. Film is a 2D experience, right? You watch on a flat screen for most of our viewing experiences. And so as a cinematographer, you're always looking for ways of like bringing that depth to camera. And I thought the first thing that jumped out to me was is using the frame. Literally the first shot, the car winding down the road, it creates this big swooping S, and it's coming from like far away to up close, and you're really like feeling the depth, feeling the environment, and you're right, the way the camera moves through scenes is it just explores every nook and cranny. So at times you're like, the cars in the opening chase scene with the first zombie, I think is a great example of that, where you're inside the car, and then you're getting the shot reverse shot, which is going like through the window, like behind the zombie, and then back inside with Barbara, and then you're getting the wide shots outside the car, and then you're getting Barbara running away and the camera dialing back in front of her. You're getting shots where it's focused on the foreground and Barbara's running into focus. Those are things that like you think through and try to achieve as a modern filmmaker, and he's doing it back in the day as a one-man band, really. And yes, there's errors. I thought some of the funny things that stood out were like the opening scene with Johnny and Barbara at the grave. Like, the close-ups had this nice, I thought for the day, a really nice key light. And then when you cut to the wide shot, there's all of a sudden no key light, and they're almost like silhouetted against the sky. I don't know what the decision was there to like cut the key light, but
I don't know. There's a couple like that, like you said too. I think when they cut to the reporters, it's still supposed to all be the same day, but it's like daylight. Like, there's a lot of like lighting and technical issues. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the old lenses have this really bad vignetting, and like there's like one in the basement with the two lovers. There's the scene where they're talking about I don't remember what they're talking about now, because that was the moment I was like zoned out, like, why are we having this conversation? But the funny thing that caught my eye was that they're breaking the 180 rule, where typically if you draw a line between two people talking, you're on the same side of that line. And in this one, they were like across that line, breaking that 180 rule, which as a modern filmmaker, you just kind of know is a no-no. But I don't know if it's because the way your like heads are hidden behind the other person's head when you're embraced, but Romero had no problem at least breaking that convention. And it's a little confusing because both characters are looking like frame right. So you're like, a wide shot would have helped establish the area, the space, but you don't get that. So, but whatever, you're not invested in that. You're invested in the story, and he gets away with it. So it's fine.
Oh, totally. And just, I feel like some of those close-up shots are absolute bangers, especially when we're talking about Karen killing Helen. Like, the entirety of the way that is shot, I am obsessed with. And it was greatly helped by that music. Yeah. And it is shocking to me in a way that is like primarily stock footage music, because it seems to fit so well and create this really weird and off-putting atmosphere, especially for like what's going to happen. But particularly in that scene, it has this really weird psychedelic quality when she's
with
stabbing her with the
like
trowel.
reverb.
Like,
yeah,
the like, yeah, and she's like, yeah, it's like so fucking weird, but like, there's something about that works so well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's straight out of Psycho, right? Like the like stabbing scene, which is like largely seen in like close-ups of like the knife coming back, and then the shadow of the stabbing on the wall with the blood splatter dripping down. It's really great cinematography. And yeah, sure, the audio is like a little weird sci-fi almost.
I like it. I actually really like that weird synthy vibe going on. I don't know. It would, in a modern movie, I think would like completely throw me off of what's going on. But there is something about that really works for me. And maybe it's just like good acting that's being sold. The music's working with it. Maybe the shots are tight and working with it. I don't know what it is. But it's genuinely like just such a great scene. And it's very quick, but it's like one of the most memorable. Like that's the photo we see. Like Karen is like the face a lot of like the pictures with Night of the Living Dead, which is wild because she's like barely in the movie. But like, that's how iconic it is to me.
Right. And the best death. I don't think there's two ways about it. It's that and maybe the car blowing up is just fun, but that one to me.
Oh, and the entrails pulled out after.
The barbecue. Now I think one of the reasons that scene's so great is the lighting. It played a huge role in this movie.
Yes.
Romero is not at all afraid of characters being in shadow, walking through the pools of light. You know, at times it was like the cinematography was pretty classic, but you had this chiaroscuro lighting that sort of like distorted the rooms and gave you that sort of like claustrophobic feeling of like not knowing what's around the corner and not being able to see what's in the frame. So I thought it was super effective. And then, you know, combined with it being black and white, gives it a really eerie quality.
It's such like a great happenstance that they just didn't have the money for color film stock, because truly it really enhances like the effects. Like you can't notice those. I'm sure the makeup wouldn't look nearly as good if it was in color. So it just was one of those things where it's like, no, you really did yourself a favor actually by not having the money to be able to film this in color, because cinematically, I feel like it'd be an entirely different experience if it was in color and not necessarily in a good way.
So did you ever watch the colored version of this? You don't know?
I am adamantly opposed to shit like this. I'm not gonna lie. It really throws me off. I don't like it at all.
It's like the re-edited versions of Star Wars. Like, what'd you do?
I'm not a fan. Like, especially there was one time I went to watch House on Haunted Hill. Obviously, my Vincent Price shirt today, but I went to watch House on Haunted Hill and it came up in color, and I was like, no, not gonna watch this. Like, I was like, you ruined everything. Like the shadows and everything is just so much more exacerbated by like having this black and white. Obviously, that just when you add the color, everything shines, and it has this weird quality because it has been like Technicolor re-edited, and it's not like how it actually was filmed. And I loathe that. Did you watch it?
No, I've not seen it. I'm just kind of curious to like technically to see how it
does. It exist?
It does exist, and it happened very early on when like coloring film was like a new phenomenon, and they tried to like recolor it, and it just was very technically unsound at the time, and so I've heard terrible things, and yeah, there's no other way this movie is going to be effective, right? It's the black and white that really sells.
Not on that budget, no. I mean, obviously, like you get Dawn of the Dead next, which okay, like the special effects are insane, but we all know the makeup with the blue tint was not great. So like obviously they moved it into color after that, and then they improved upon that with the makeup in Day of the Dead, clearly. But I can't fathom this working on that kind of budget in color.
Yeah. We could go on and on about the cinematography, and I do kind of want to talk a little bit about the kind of the documentary feel to it at times, where like you're following the reporters. I think it might be like a cue of like, you know, a lot of the like maybe war journalism that was happening at the time, kind of some aspects of that, maybe kind of following people around and getting those handheld shots.
But it's necessary to the plot as well, because like we've said, there's no established rule prior to this, and there's no establishment of what's going on. So now it's so fucking commonplace that a lot of movies
start
just
with like the news sequences of like zombie outbreak. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
It does that great, like, where it transitions between each scene to give you the full sentence, which is amazing. Or you get characters now that just go, oh, it's a zombie thing, this is what we have to do, that just completely, like, abandon getting to that point. But the important thing to remember is, like, we didn't have that. So you had to have these, like, weird news coverage things so that the characters could figure out what the hell was going on, because otherwise, like, they're not just going to come to that conclusion on their own. And so I love that. First off, I just love that idea. Like, this is the first time these rules are being established, so it's necessary for the characters to be clued in onto what's going on. But then I also think, like, to your point of some of that acting that feels like really weirdly authentic because it's not very good. It's just kind of great, like, and I really love it.
General and then scientists, they're like repeating themselves. It's one long take, which is fun. And it's very just like mundane, and they're not like, you know, there's like this sort of cliche like power struggle, like the general, like, you know, not wanting to share any information, and the scientists kind of want to be like, no, we really believe this is what it is, and
it's really from that comet dust and the thing falling back to space.
All right,
and
so on that, I need your thoughts on just overall story. Overall story, like, one, do we like the concept of maybe this is what happened, but then two, we got to get to the ending, because it's an ending to remember.
Yes, we'll get to the ending in a second. Okay, so first off, like, do I need the space explanation? No. I mean, I don't. But, like, I get at the time that they probably felt like that was a necessary move to be like, we have to explain why this is happening. Nowadays, and even in the 80s, it was like, they're still like, okay, it's this toxic substance that blah, blah, blah. Like, there's a reason. But I think a lot of movies at this point now are just like, we don't even need to go there. We can just have a zombie outbreak happen and it's fine. We don't have to give you a reason why it happened. So I understand. Did I need it? No. Back in the day, would it have been like so irritating though to not even have like a reason why that was happening? Probably. I mean, I can only hazard a guess with that. I mean, I guess, like, how did you feel like that? Like, but again, taking out the modern element, taking out like what you expect.
No, I wrote down early on, I was like, this is awesome. It doesn't explain like why there's an outbreak. Cause I just forgot. It had been a while since I seen it. Like,
totally
10 years. And
I think you still forget about that part, to be honest, even after you've watched it 100 times.
Because it doesn't matter, you know. It's like
it doesn't matter.
You know, and now that being said, it was one of my favorite moments of camera work when they do this zoom in on Barbra as we are getting this match cut zoom in on the radio, as when you first hear that they are eating the flesh of the murder victims.
These mass murders going across statewide.
To keep going, I could listen to that all day. That's awesome. But I just thought it was so just kind of unnecessary to like add those moments, but it was a fun little piece of camera work. Ending, Taylor. Ending.
All right, I literally was talking to my dad about this the other day, and this is like the best way I can explain this, my feelings about this. So it, to me, is like the ending, not like the end of Carrie, but like the ending of Carrie where she's at the prom. Like, it's very much like this to me, where I'm like, every time I watch it, I'm somehow hoping for a different outcome. Like, Carrie's gonna be prom queen and it's all gonna work out for her. And Ben's just gonna go the window and everything's gonna work out for him. Like, I almost want to stop the movie at that point before it just devolves. But I think, again, to the point of the commentary thing, and again, maybe he wasn't trying to intentionally touch on racial issues, but he certainly was touching on just a general vibe of society at that time, which was a very bleak one, to be fair. A lot of horrifying things were going on at the time. And this ending of like, there are no survivors, there are no winners in this outcome. The person that you've been rooting for and have so much love for, it doesn't matter. You're just one of a million caught up in this awful thing that's going on.
Right.
And there are no survivors. And so in a way, it takes this film up like 100 fucking notches to like cinematic excellence by having this horrifying ending, but it doesn't mean it's any less hard to stomach. And what I think is so telling about it is that I feel that way every fucking time I watch this movie, and I've seen it so many times, and it doesn't matter. Like, my heart is still shattered at the end every time. So I just think
that is cinematic,
amazing.
Yeah, to be able to feel it every single time, over and over and over again. I think visually it was also one of the like most impactful. Just in like kind of like overtly showing the theme, and it wasn't overt, like that's not really fair, but it really just shone through in the way it was shot, because just like lines of white men walking with guns, and it's like, okay, who do the zombies represent, who does society represent? And there's so many different ways you could potentially interpret it, like like it's very reminiscent of like the lines of soldiers like walking through and killing Viet Cong, like just seeing the enemy, the Viet Cong, is this like faceless, zombie being that doesn't, it's like they're just dead to us. Like they're not people, I could see as one interpretation. And then of course, like the racial interpretation of like, just hunting down, the people that you see as less than human, is, there's
especially the photographs. I feel like that, like you said, that editing use. And I saw it on Dead Meat, so I don't want to take like credit for like coming up with that analysis, but I also feel like it's a very like, that's the first thing you kind of think of. It's like
it feels like photographs you've seen of like lynchings and Yes,
100%.
Right?
Yes.
I mean,
it makes your stomach feel
you just
awful.
turn, and it's like, I can't help but just feel like it was Romero's bleak outlook in the late 60s of what's happening in the world and in American society, and
totally. While the civil rights movement is going on, while we're entering wars time, like getting into that stuff, like it's very prevalent. There's an atmosphere clearly going on in society, and whether it was intentional at this point on his end or not, it's definitely there, and it definitely still resonates, I feel like, today still.
Oh, 100%. And I wouldn't want to see the ending any other way. Another interesting thing is like the traditional values and who you expect to survive the movie, right? Your like lead heroine dies, your the family dies, your family values don't get you through this, the lovers die, that doesn't get you through it.
Nothing saves you in the end. Nothing saves you in the end.
Bleak AF.
It's so fucking bleak. It's so bleak. It's like, it's so hard because it's like what really makes it next level, and where you can really see that he then builds upon the things that were like made in this first film. But it's still like, it's so grim. It's actually like one of the like more gut wrenching in a way, like endings to any horror film in a way.
The little mini movies, I can't think of mini movies that I'm like, that like distraught over the end. Like, oh my
Ouch.
god,
Yeah.
no one made it out alive. I don't know. Do we have anything else we gotta touch on? Because it's
We gotta like end it with something like a little bit more like I don't know, like we can't end it like the movie. We gotta go like
God damn you, Romero, for making us feel
yeah, honestly. And if you ever watch, it was like, oh my god, I can't remember. They just put it out on Shudder like a year or two ago, but it was actually like
a show or what?
The Commission on Aging hired Romero to like do this kind of piece to like talk about like the societal views on aging.
Okay.
And it was so horrifying that they were like, nope, we're not gonna put that out into the world.
Romero he's just a dark fucker, huh? He's like he has no faith in humanity.
He is, but I swear, at least like some of the next films, you're like, there's like some heroes and some people to root for that make it, and you're like, yeah,
they better make some money. I need to give some people a little hope here.
It gets a little less painful as we move into other chapters of Romero films. I mean, there's always a bleakness because it's always social commentary, so it's always tragic in some level, but at least like he picks it up moving forward. But shit, we have to do something like best zombie or best effect or something that isn't like just like, here's the saddest, most depressing ending. Have a nice night.
Oh my god! All right, how about? I mean, I think we're settled on. Well, I was gonna say best zombie kill, or zombie that got killed is. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
I was gonna say because best kill, best kill by a zombie is obviously Karen, 100%.
Yeah.
Best zombie kill. Okay, I actually really like the guy that comes in who also was like a production person because like of course that Ben like stabs through the head and then he like we don't get the actual shot because obviously it's like it's the late 60s, but then you get that like little hole in the head view and he's like, don't look at it, like, and I'm like, oh, I love, like, it just is a fun effect. I like that one. That's a fun one.
That was kind of a funny moment, right? Yeah, I was a little bummed at that sequence because
we want the headshot nowadays.
Yeah, I know, but then the best you could do is a cutaway to the head with a bullet wound. Because it
was a stabby wound, but yeah.
Right. So, but they had some great like effects before that of like the squibs I thought were really well used, where they were well timed. You'd see gunshot and squib in the same shot, as opposed to a cutaway of like a shot of the gun firing and then a shot of the squib exploding. But in a lot of these shots, they were like perfectly timed. I was almost wondering if they, had like now you have like the triggers on the guns actually trigger the squibs. There's no way he had that on set, right? So,
oh God, no! Are you kidding me?
That's awesome that they were able to do it so well. So I would love to hear any like BTS on that.
I also like Harry's like little arm thing he's got going on because Kieran ate like this part of his arm and then he just like shows up with like part of an arm extending out, and it's not the best effect because you can clearly tell there's like a hiding of the hand thing, but I kind of dig it.
Yeah, no, that was fun. I'll allow it. All right.
Favorite zombies for you?
God, I mean, that's the things I don't like. I think when Johnny came back was kind of like the fun moment for me, like, yeah,
that was a good one.
Fucking murder Barbra.
Oh my God, you host. She had just come back from her cat. I was like, oh, she's being useful. And now she just got dragged off into the horde.
Yeah. I mean, that's like one of those like that returns in the genre that
They counter as a death, but I will say this from Shaun of the Dead, and this is a previous episode we did forever ago, so if you don't want to hear the spoiler on that, skip the next like 10 seconds. But I do like, she also entered the crowd swinging a limb and made it up a tree, so we don't actually know. Is Barbra confirmed? We didn't see. We don't know. Maybe she made it out.
All right. Bottom line.
She made it up a tree. That's it. Look it. We made it happy. She made it up the tree. She made it fine. Yeah, just like Diane.
Was a survivor. hope and faith in humanity restored.
Yeah, there we go.
I love it.
Nailed it.
Yes, well done, Taylor. Romero, you brilliant son of a bitch. Thank you for giving us
R.I.P. Love
Night of the
you.
Living Dead. And man, I hope you all enjoy this movie as much as us. And I hope this inspired you to go make zombie flicks. Because they're such a fun, easy way to get into film. Please share with us some of your favorite zombie flicks. Give us some of the indie
Yes.
that hasn't been so hot. Like, we want to see them.
Oh yeah, well definitely, don't get us wrong. This is not, obviously it's not our first zombie film. I don't think this will be our last zombie film, but if you've got something that we've never heard of, and yes, I have watched One Cut of the Dead and it's amazing, so you're gonna have to go deeper than that for me if you want us to cover something. But yeah, please guys, as always, our handles are typically Pod Under Your Bed. You can find us primarily on Instagram. We do have a Gmail account though, and Suja, you touched on it earlier, right? We do have a YouTube account. We just never check it.
No.
Oh, you didn't bring it up. Oh my god.
We ought to look it up real quick because I just want to shout out whoever made the comment lately. Cool vibe. I like your vibe. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all we're here for.
Thank you.
Guys. We just want to have a good time, talk about horror. So I'm down with it. I'm glad you are too.
Yeah, we do post everything. Sorry guys, we like never say this, but we actually automatically upload everything to YouTube. We just don't check it that often. So please send the comments through there if that's the easiest way for you. I promise at some point one of us will catch it. Primarily though, Instagram is our go-to. So if you want to get a hold of us, send us movie recommendations, cocktail recommendations. We are here for it. But we will find you if you send it through one of the other avenues as well.
Love it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.